Welcome everybody to our very first H-PEP online session. You guys are awesome. You all made it online. I hope it was an easy process for you to get here on Ultra. This is the address that we will be meeting at for the live sessions. And right now I just want to introduce a very dear friend. Oh, Heather has a question. Her name is Dr. Teri Lewis. And she's from Oregon, and we met many moons ago when I was in school at University of Oregon. And since then, we've kept in touch. She's such an amazing mentor and, like I mentioned, a dear friend, and very skilled and knowledgeable in PBIS. So we're so excited to have her here today. I'm going to turn it over to her in a few seconds. First, we are going to have some quiet time. So, as you all know, in our first session at our opening retreat, we just want to thank you everyone for coming to that. We hope you had a great week so far. We mentioned the importance of self-care and being able to really take some time out of your day. So in order to practice that, we're just going to play 3 minutes of a nice quiet song, and your job is to do whatever you want to do that's going to help you to unwind and relax. So that could be journaling in your journal about things that happened this past week or in the past. You could just sit there and be quiet and let your thoughts come in and out. You can sit and meditate or pray or focus on your goals. You can start envisioning your future. You can draw, you can breathe, you can stretch, whatever you want to do. But basically, we're going to take 3 minutes out of our day to have some sort of peaceful time for ourselves. And Christy's going to play some music. And when the music stops, we'll come back. And then we will start to do our introductions. And then we will start with our session. So does anyone have any questions about that? So we're going to take 3 minutes to do journaling, stretching, breathing, whatever you want, something special for yourself.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Christy.
Okie dokie.
I'm my video off. Okay. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I got very in the zone there. That was really nice. I'm going to turn it over to Teri to introduce herself, and just a gentle reminder, if you guys can remember what Uncle Kanoa told us about being in Hakalau and in being present and in flow when we're learning, to try to focus also on the ceiling and the walls on the side of you, so we can be in big picture thinking throughout the presentation. So thank you, Uncle Kanoa, for that reminder always. All right, so Teri, can you introduce yourself and we'll get started?
Yeah, thank you guys for taking your time on your weekend to come and talk. As Naomi said, my name is Teri, and Naomi and I have known each other a very long time, and she's just been a blessing in my life, and all the wonderful, kind things she said about me, I could easily say about her as well. And so thankfully I got an opportunity to continue working with her and all of you guys with the H-PEP project. I spend a lot of my time working with schools around school climate and with programs around how to build positive school climate. And so today we're going to sort of start that conversation and then continue it for the next 3 webinars after this. I started my career working with individual students who have pretty significant behavior issues. And it became clear to myself and some others like George the Guy and Rob Horner that was kind of doing it the wrong way. And so while my passion is working with kids who have behavior challenges, I spend a lot of my time now building the capacity of schools and focusing on climate and relationships so that they are better able to support those kids on their own. And I'm going to apologize. I am getting over a horrible beginning of the year cold. Since I live in Oregon, we have a lot of rain. I'm actually sitting in my living room with a wonderful fire behind me in the fireplace. So as we are going through today, as Naomi said, Christy's going to help me sort of keep track. If you guys have questions or you want to make a comment, you can either do the chat room or you can hit the hand button. Just to try to make this a little more interactive, even though we all get to kind of be in our own places, it'd be nice to sort of stay connected. So any quick questions before we get started? Because I'm going to turn around and ask you guys a couple questions. All right. So as Naomi said, PBIS is called Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. And really, it's kind of like a systems approach or a framework to work on that positive climate so that it's a place we as adults want to come to work. It's a place that parents want to bring their children, and it's a place where children want to come. So if you think about that, if you know something about PBIS or don't know something about it yet, sometimes it's helpful, and again, it's kind of funny to do this on a webinar, but if you can tell me what do you know or what would you want to know, maybe what makes you excited about learning about PBIS, or what are some of your concerns? And if you have those, like I said, either raise a hand or hit your chat button, and Christy's going to help me kind of keep track of all that. Or you can unmute your mic too, because there's not very many of us. Yeah, I see Linda raised her hand. Do you want to unmute your mic?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's a pleasure to kind of sort of meet you. At our school, we have had PBIS. We have coaches that go and attend the Diana Browning Wright.
Okay.
And they come back and they bring back all those wonderful strategies to support positive behaviors throughout the entire school, including from, you know, the staff and the faculty. So we do a lot of like 6 to 1, you know, 6 positives to 1 negative. So that's what our kind of theme and goal is this year.
Oh, that's awesome. So today's probably going to be a lot of review, but if there are things that you have questions about, or if you want to share some cool way that you are implementing PBIS in your school, please share those, because it's always nice to get multiple examples.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else have any quick questions or thoughts about PBIS before we get started? All right. So, like I said, PBIS is really a framework, and sometimes that's difficult for schools and programs because we're so used to having like a curriculum. And the reason it's a framework is that you kind of have to take these guiding principles that we're going to talk about across these webinars and make them fit your school's culture, your family, your staff, right, your students, the community. So there's some frameworks, some guideline kinds of things. Really what we want to do is say, let's not do something fast, but let's do something that lasts over time. You know, so we're looking at making it something that's meaningful so that it's something that will still be there as a part of your culture 5 years from now and 10 years from now. One of the things that we really stress is using data to help us make better decisions. So we can use data to say, what are our strengths? What's going really, really well? We want to make sure we keep it going. What are our concerns or our challenges? You know, what are our resources that we have? And where do we want to kind of start? And then once we try something, we can come back and say, well, did it work, right? We had this concern and we decided to do something. Did it make a difference? So we stress throughout sort of this use of data really to help us make those decisions, to make our choices sort of better. So like I said, today is just kind of our first one, and we're really going to talk like big idea stuff. We're really going to just sort of talk about what does PBIS look like. And so I'm going to use some examples from some schools that we have worked with in the past. All right, and I know, Linda, you said you have a new computer. I have a new computer as well, and I'm moving from Mac to PC. So my computer and I are kind of fighting sometimes. So I'm a little slow with the technology. I apologize. Some of the things we know nationally are that about 1 in 5 students, 20%, are in need of some type of mental health services. Yet only about 70%, or only about 30% of those receive services. That means 70% are not receiving the services that they need. And like I said, I spend a lot of my time working with kids who are at risk. And over the last 2 years, more and more, we're not only talking about mental health, but we're talking about trauma. Kids who have had or are continuing to experience those adverse childhood experiences in their life, and how that impacts not just their social emotional learning, but their academic instructional learning as well. We also know that the number of students who are identified as emotional behavior disordered has doubled in the last 30 years. There's a lot of reasons for this number to be like that. Part of it is we're probably getting better at identifying and supporting students, which would be awesome, because this is a group that's traditionally not identified for support until they're much older, upper elementary, middle school. Part of it is just the stress of our culture in general, the economy. Anytime we see those kind of stressors in our adult lives, that impacts our children as well. We see the influence of technology, kids spending more time on video games and TVs and on their phones. It actually has changed them neurologically as far as attention span, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of stuff that comes into play. But we're seeing, like I said, more and more students who have more intense needs than traditional, even when we were all kids in schools. So what's the impact on that? Well, the impact is that about 30% of our teachers leave the field. And the number one reason teachers leave the field is because of classroom management issues, having to deal with student social behavior and not having enough time to focus on the instruction. We also know that even though we may have a very small number of students in our classrooms who have those intense needs, they actually can take up about 50% of our time in the classroom. So we end up spending huge amounts of our time as teachers on a small number of these. So what does that mean? What are we going to do? Well, a lot of times, especially if teachers aren't supported, if they don't have resources or they don't have the confidence to address problem behavior, we rely on more punitive kinds of strategies. So exclusion and punishment, we know, are the most common responses to problem behaviors in school. Unfortunately, while using those strategies stops the behavior right then, right, which makes it pretty seductive for us as adults. We have this kid who's challenging. We can send them to see the principal, the administrator, or to time out. Oh, that aversive situation is gone, right? I can go back to teaching. So it has this seductive, it works in the immediate, but what we know is long term, if we continue to rely only on punishment, we see not only an increase in problem behaviors like aggression, but those actually start to escalate. We see vandalism, truancy, and eventually we get to dropping out. Right? That's sort of the framework or the pathway for kids when we talk about that school to prison sort of pipeline for kids. So we want to do something to break that. So I'm going to use some examples from schools that we have worked with in the past. We have a middle schooler, Jason, and in one school year, Jason received 87 office discipline referrals. So for major problem behaviors, not minor problem behaviors. There's only, like 180 school days, so that's about every other day Jason is receiving an office discipline referral. At some point, we have to wonder whether office discipline referrals are really working to reduce Jason's future problem behavior. I'll pick on my son, who was just texting me. He's now 26 years old. He got one minor behavior incident report when he was in first grade. He never got another one. So there's a time and a place for office discipline referrals, right? It's for kids who kind of get it, are doing really, really well, and we can use that to say, wow, don't do that, right? It helps sort of make it clear, that sort of gray stuff. But at some point, if we have a kid like Jason who's received 87, now we have to question whether or not this is really working the way we had wanted. Is it increasing Jason's success? Right, in that same school, Jason's teacher, right, she wrote 273 office discipline referrals in a year. Now, even if we take Jason out of that 273, that's a lot of referrals. So now we either have a teacher who has a really tough class list of students and probably needs some student support, or we have a teacher who is just struggling on her own with classroom management, with instructional management. And if we do nothing, this is one of those teachers who's likely to leave the profession. So we want to, again, say, how can we identify quickly students who need support and staff who need support as well, right? We had a middle school principal who couldn't get substitutes when her teachers were absent. She would call on the sub list and say, hey, I have an open sub position, are you interested? And then when they would find out what school it was, they'd cough and say, oh my gosh, I'm not feeling well. Or they'd say, oh, I totally forgot, I have this appointment I have to go to. So she couldn't get any substitutes to come to her classroom. They're a school that after working with PBIS for about 3 years, they had a list of subs, and to get on their sub list, you had to come and learn about how their school climate was set up. So you had to come to a half-day orientation to the school, even to make it onto the sub list. And this principal, about 5 years into implementing PBIS, actually became the principal of the year for the state of Oregon. This is actually one of your high schools. And what we found when we were working with one of your high schools is that they were looking at their in-school detention, and they saw that fourth period had way more in-school detention than any other time during the day, right? And sort of all things being equal, we should have detention spread equally across the day. So they looked at it and they said, okay, well, what are kids getting in-school detention for? They found out they were getting it for being tardy. And they said, well, still, that's kind of funny. Why are they all tardy fourth period, right? Because they just went to the detention room. And they realized that after fourth period was lunch and that the detention room was right next to the cafeteria. So if I am a kid and I am tardy, I go to the detention room, I do my work, which I was going to do anywhere, but now I'm right next to the cafeteria at lunchtime. So I get in line first, I get better choices of food, I get more time to socialize because I'm not spending my time in lunch. So they were able to use their data to say, we don't have a huge tardy issue, we have a forced period issue. And instead of doing a huge intervention, they said, okay, the detention room has to wait 5 minutes after the bell. They're the last classroom to get released to go to lunch. So why do we want to focus on this? Well, as I was saying, you know, I started my career trying to work with just individual students and trying to make them fit schools. We really want to say, you know, schools, preschool programs, elementary schools, middle, high, are important places. For a lot of our students, it's kind of that environment that's regular and predictable. It's consistent. It's positive. It's where they can learn and grow, right? Their social, emotional, and their sort of academic skills. They get a lot of positive adult modeling, all the modeling that you guys do when you're working with your kids. And they actually learn from their peers. So they get appropriate peer modeling as well. With that positive climate, it's a time where they get that regular acknowledgement from adults and even from their friends. And the whole point is to foster that academic and that social success. So they're critical for us to step back and say, how can we support the staff so they can support the students? But that is easier said than done. There are a lot of challenges to making big systems kinds of changes in educational programs. One is that our primary goal is on academics, right? You guys are kind of a fun group to talk to because you actually see social emotional learning as one of your primary goals when you're doing early childhood or lower elementary. But a lot of times, especially if I'm in a secondary school, they'll say, I teach physics, I teach chemistry, I teach, you know, American literature. And it's hard to say, well, you also have to teach social skills as well, social behavior as well. It's also hard to get districts or states to invest in prevention programs. Why am I going to put a lot of money into a program trying to prevent a behavior that may or may not happen, right? A problem that may or may not happen. So it's hard to sort of take that preventative approach. A lot of times our structure makes it difficult for us as adults to work together. Either our schedules, or we're pretty busy, or we're fragmented, we're on multiple sites and locations, so it makes it difficult. Or what we love to do in education is ask you to, tell you to do something new, implement something new, but we forget to follow up with the skills and the training and the resources. So you have something added to your plate, but not the support to be able to do it well. So PBIS really is just that framework that says, let's set up an environment that makes it easier for us to do all those things that we want to do and we know are the right things to do. I have a friend in Idaho who basically says PBIS is common sense that's often uncommon, right? Or I'll say, I think I've spent like the past 30 years of my career pretty much just going around and working with educational programs and saying, just be nice. You know, be nice to each other, be nice to your students, be nice to the family. So PBIS is a way to say, let's take all those practices we know are we know that are really good for our kids and support them through the use of systems. That way students will be successful socially, and that will help foster their academic success, which leads them to being sort of lifelong learners and successful when they eventually, you know, become adults. So how do we go about doing that? Well, one of the things is we have a group of adults in the school who are respected, and they're really sort of the leaders. So a lot of times in our school, we'll have teams that will have 3, 4, 5 sort of people. It's great to have a parent on the team, right? If we're trying to build a climate that's welcoming to parents and families, it's great to have that parent voice. When I work with middle schools and high schools, we actually even want to make sure we have that student voice. We need the administrator on the team to give it priority. They're the ones who really can say, you have a protected time to meet, here's a little bit of money maybe to support the program, here's some additional resources. We need all the adults in the program to say that addressing their school climate is important. When they agree to say, I'm not going to think about this as my classroom, but I'm going to think as the whole school is my home, and that I'm going to commit to and work together, collaborate with my colleagues to have this sort of warm, welcoming sort of home environment. We're going to take that positive, proactive approach. Like I said, we're going to use data to help us all the way through. And we're going to say, we know that we're going to have kids who have different levels of need. So we're going to build a continuum of support that's going to be able to support all of our students. And we also are going to come into it saying, it's going to take a while. Typically, it will take a school about 3 to 5 years to build that continuum. But that's just kind of building it. It even takes like 8 to 10 years to get it to the point where it's kind of easy to do, where we think it's just become a part of our culture. So when we work with schools, we say, yes, we're going to focus on those practices. So what do you do when this happens? How is it best to use, effective classroom management? What do you do when kids start to have a little bit of trouble? What do you do when kids are having a lot of issues and they need some pretty intensive support? But we know that those practices are only as beneficial to our students as the adults who are able to implement them well. So we focus on the systems that support the adults in the school. So when the adults, the staff are supported, they are able to implement the practices well so that the students are supported. And again, we use the data to tell us what are our strengths, what are our needs, how is it going. So we focus on this data systems practice kind of mantra. We also, like I said, we know we need that continuum of support. So we're going to focus on prevention, and we're going to look at what's that primary support that we're going to put in there. How do we take kids, and I always use my daughter as this example, how do you take a kid like Rachel and make sure that she stays a successful, happy, engaged student all the way through? She's such just an easy point and kick kind of kid all the way through her academic career. So how do we make sure that she doesn't become upset and disenfranchised at some point in time? Then we know we've got about 10 to 15% of our students who need a little bit of support. So what are we going to do for them, right? Kids who are starting to struggle. And then we know we're going to have about that 1 to 5% who are going to need intense support, who are really, really struggling. So we always talk about this triangle, and anytime you've probably heard a PBIS presentation or anyone talk about it, this triangle gets showed. This is really that 3-tiered perspective where whether we're talking about on the academic side, like an RTI, response to intervention, or whether we're talking about the social emotional side, sort of like a PBIS, we'll really have this 3-tiered model where 80–90% of our students are just doing well on their own, just with the climate that we set up. We've got another 5 to 10% who may need a little bit more support. So we're going to identify them early, and we're going to make sure they get the appropriate support they need. And then we're going to have that 1 to 5% of students who are not only going to need intense support, but probably will need some level of support the rest of their life. So we look at that. And I think if we're really going to do a whole school, we not only need to do the social emotional side on the PBS, but we have to focus on the academic side, especially as we move up to kids who are struggling or kids who have intense needs. You can have a student who has just as having behavior challenges and not having academic challenges, but it's really, really likely that if they're having behavior challenges, they are also having academic challenges. We can look at things that we know, such as students who are adjudicated, who are incarcerated. About 80% of them are functionally illiterate. And I see that AJ has his hand up. You can either type a question, make a comment, or turn on your mic would be awesome as well. I can barely hear you. I don't.
I'm a SBDH EA for the DOE, and
yeah.
My question was, because I work both sides, I work residential and for the state. So
yeah.
What I've been noticing a lot, well, here for me in the situations and schools and students I've been working with, we've been dealing with a lot of work refusal, like avoidance, work avoidance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when students have what we call is escape maintained or avoidant behaviors, they're
Yes.
harder to work with. And so we're not going to talk about it a lot today, but my approach to when a kid is struggling with a behavior, they're having a behavior issue, they're being non-compliant, disruptive, aggressive, withdrawn, whatever the behavior issue is, my perspective is, well, they're doing it for a reason, right? So we talk about that as the function of the behavior. What's their need? And needs really fall into two big camps. I want something to happen. I want your attention, right? And a lot of times when we're dealing with early childhood, they want attention. They want the teacher's attention. They want their parents' attention, their friends' attention.
Yes.
They just don't have really good ways of doing it. We also have kids
Yes.
like you were talking about that you're working with. They want to escape. They don't want to be at school. They don't want to work with us.
Yes.
To me, those kids almost immediately jump to tier 3 because it's so difficult. Right? We already have
Right.
this kid who's got more than 1 foot out the door, you know, and they're not really working with us well. So we have to do some pretty intense interventions when we work with those kids.
Yes. Because right now I have a.
Go ahead.
So yeah, because right now I have a case with. I had him from he's finishing 2nd grade. He's now 4th grade. I'm actually weaning off of him, but academically is the behavioral side has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
He's yeah. So I mean, it's the academic side that I'm struggling with right now.
Mm-hmm.
Only because I have some ties to where I'm being told it's not my job. In a sense, it's the teacher's job. I'm just a support for behavioral. But I mean, I'm trying, you know, because they're not there all the time. So I also help academically in a sense.
Yep.
It's getting better, but it's kind of frustrating because there's a lot. I mean, every day is a lot of. It's not that he can't do it in a sense, but he just don't want to. Like, get him to write a sentence is a struggle. You know, it's just hard. It's just hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're talking about. I mean, those are the kids that, like I said, those are the kids that's my passion to work with, and it's very challenging. But it's also why this triangle is not split in half anymore, because you can't work on behavior if you have academic issues, right? And you can't teach over problem behavior, so you've got to address those simultaneously. One of the things, and that's where PBIS came from, is that when we're working with students like this kiddo you're talking about, it's so much easier if we have that strong foundation and climate in place, right? He's still going to need a lot of support, and it's still going to be challenging, but it'll get easier if you step back and say, let's build a better foundation. Let's build that positive climate, and then maybe increase this kid's motivation, increase staff understanding, right, and have more resources to support this kid.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a perfect example of why PBIS gets started. So,
yes, thank you so much for what you do. Continue the good work.
Oh, thank you guys. You guys are out there on the front line. I just get to be really spoiled and come and visit and celebrate all that you do. So,
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna thank you. So one of the things we know is that when schools build that climate, right, that like the students that AJ was talking about is still going to be there, but there's going to be many, many less. So this is data from that middle school that I was talking about. And before they started, and they had about 2,600 office referrals for about 500 students in that first year. After 1 year of PBIS, they dropped that down by almost 1,000. And then you can see in this graph, and they have this ongoing today, they have many, many less. Now, they're always going to have some. So even if you look at 06, 07, you know, they're still going to have several hundred maybe across a year. They got this number even lower because you still have like Jason who gets his 87, right? And he's going to be difficult to support, and he's probably going to have some behavior challenges through his life. But it's so much easier to manage several hundred than several thousand. And you can think about these referrals as every referral means a kid is out of the instructional environment for about 45 minutes. So we're losing that instructional time. And you're eating up about 15 to 20 minutes of an administrator's time. So for every referral that we drop, we regain 45 minutes of instruction, and we regain about 15, 20 minutes of administrator time. So when we work with schools, we say, okay, that's great, you're excited, but where are you at? Right? This is sort of that 3 to 5 year process that we were talking about. It takes a long time. So a lot of schools come and they say, well, I want to learn more about it. And they go, okay, like I'm pretty excited about my school climate. Well, let's get it going. And it takes 2 to 3 years just at installation and initial implementation, just to kind of get things figured out, reach some agreements, right, get things started. Then we move into the last phases, right, from this implementation science perspective, where we focus on elaboration and continuous improvement. How do we do it better? How do we make it easier? How do we make it so that you're doing PBIS, you're thinking about your positive school climate, but not sort of in the forefront? It's not work anymore, right? How do we just embed it so that it's just how we do business around here? It's how we operate. So like I said, we think about that data systems practices. It's not a curriculum. Like I said, it's a framework that we're going to go through this process, but we break it out and say, let's focus on school-wide and classrooms. Can we, as all the people in the building, come up with a common purpose and approach to discipline? Do we agree it's important? Can we identify a clear set of values that we have, 3 to 5 sort of positive values or expectations? Then, once we've identified them, how are we going to teach them? Let's just not assume that all kids think about safety on the playground the same way. So let's make it clear that when we talk about safety on the playground, or we talk about respect in the classroom, that we are talking about the same thing. So we're going to figure out how to teach it, then we're going to acknowledge it, thank kids, let them know that we saw it, how much we appreciate it. We're going to know that kids are going to make errors, so we're going to come up with ways to sort of respond to those errors, the behavior challenges, and then we're going to monitor. How are the kids doing? How are we doing? You know, at the classroom level, we have to really talk about classroom management. We have to talk about effective instruction. So we're going to take that framework and we're going to walk it into our classroom, and we're going to tailor it to fit our particular classroom culture. We're going to focus on those positives to negatives. I think Linda was saying that sort of their school mission right now, the more positives than negative interactions. We're going to focus on active supervision, moving around, scanning, interacting with kids. And we're going to give teachers strategies for when problem behaviors happen so that they feel more empowered and they feel more confident and that they don't choose to leave the field. We're also going to do a thing called pre-corrections. If you're headed into an assembly, and they don't get to do assemblies very often, and you may say, oh, okay, well, we're going to an assembly. Who can tell me how we can be responsible in an assembly? Who can tell me how we can be, you know, appreciative in an assembly? And sort of get the kid's head in, oh, okay, this is different. Let me think about how I'm going to behave in that setting. So we sort of set them up for success before they even get there. So Naomi is writing these awesome, long things that I can't read and say at the same time, my presentation, but she's making some great comments about her experiences. I think that's what you're saying, Naomi, in my quick look at it.
Yes, sorry.
No, that's fine. They're awesome. I just can't read them that quickly. We also have to think about that instructional side. How are we teaching? What are we teaching? You know, how are we presenting it? And we have to think about the environment. Is it welcoming? Is it clear? Are there areas? Is it easy for kids to move around? Easy for adults to move around? So we think about the environment as well in the classroom. We then know that there's all sorts of areas in a school and that are not classrooms. There's hallways, there's bathrooms, there's where kids come in the morning and buses are being picked up and dropped off by parents. There's the office, there's the playgrounds, right? Like all those places. Well, they're very different. So then we think about all the ways we need to support kids in those environments. So we do a lot of active supervision. We do a lot of the positives there. We try to set up routines as well to make it clear. Then, like I said, we know we're going to have those individual students who are going to continue to struggle. But we're going to have more resources. We're going to have skilled staff who feel supported. We're going to have this positive environment. We're going to take that function-based approach where we realize that the kid is behaving for a reason. And now it's our challenge to figure out what that reason is. And we'll have fewer kids. We may have a handful as opposed to 30 or 40 kids who are struggling during their day. What we know is that if we do this, if we invest and we take that 3 to 5 years and we work together as a team, if we do that, we see problem behavior go down. If we're also using instruction, we see academic performance increase. We see increased attendance, and we know that attendance is a red flag for student failure. Even if we understand it, even if we know it's because of something that's happening in their home life, or it's because of a health issue that the student is struggling with, chronic health issue, we know that puts them up for school failure. So we see increased attendance. The people, community perceive the school as safer. They perceive it as more organized, which means now we're getting that less staff turnover. We're not having 30% of teachers leave for that school. They're keeping their staff. And parents, communities think the teachers are more effective. So they have higher positive ratings of the teachers. The other thing, I was just having a conversation earlier this week, and you guys are like the bomb at doing this, is bringing cultural responsive practices into PBIS. By bringing things in that fit the culture of your students and your community, knowing that we have multiple cultures that are represented. And those can be not only ethnic, but they can be, ethnic, racial, they can be religious, they can be gender identity, they can be economic, but that we take that into consideration, right? Again, we build that sort of a climate. So we're getting a lot of sort of emerging promising data that when we do that, we have this improved sort of culture climate. So how do we do it? Well, you get a team of people. You make sure that your staff are committed. You have that buy-in, right? You're ready to take on this approach. You use your data to say, where do we want to be at the end of this year? Where would we like to be 3 to 5 years from now? And so you build a plan. How are we going to get there? You do all sorts of stuff to make sure that your staff are successful. So that's what we mean by that high fidelity of implementation. When we say we're going to catch kids being good, we come up with tricks and gimmicks to help the teachers remember to do that on a regular basis. And we watch and see if it made a difference. Did we get to where we wanted to go? Are we going to end 3 years from now where we hoped that we would be? So it also takes us, like I said, I'm giving you guys like this quick little, here's a little bit about PBIS. I'm just about to start training with a bunch of schools this year just for this first piece, this foundation piece. They're going to work with me for 4 solid days, 2 days in the fall, 1 day in the winter, 1 day in the spring. So there's tons of stuff that go into building this sort of climate, but that's really our first year. What are we looking at? Right? We're looking at using evidence-based practices. We're looking at building the skills and the expertise in the school. We're making sure it's team-based. Right? It has to be, PBIS has to be top-down and bottom-up simultaneously. But there's a team that's respected that's going to guide the process. We're going to use our data. We're going to do continuous progress monitoring, checking in. We're going to screen to help identify kids who need support early on, and we're going to support teachers so that the full program is implemented well, the way we had meant it to be implemented. So when we think about that implementation fidelity, here's another sort of way to think about it. If we're going to get true change, it means we have to have a vision, skills, incentives, resources, and that action plan. If we start, but we forget to explain the vision to the staff, they get confused. They don't know why we're doing the things we're doing. Why are you asking me to learn this new thing? If we get them all excited about the vision, but oops, we forgot to give them the skills, then you get people who are anxious. I know what I'm supposed to do. I just don't know how to do it. Or if you give them the visions and the skills, but there's no incentives, here's really where the principal or the administrator is critical, where we say, yes, this is important, you get gradual change, right? I'm one of those people, like I live and die by my to-do list. If I have something on my to-do list and my supervisor doesn't ask me about it for a couple weeks, I just cross it off my list. It must not be important, right? So we'll get progress, but until we make it important, we won't get real progress and change. Or if we get everybody all excited and we make sure that they understand it's important, but we don't give them the tools that they need to be successful, those resources, you're going to get a lot of frustrated staff. And then the last one is, if we get ourselves all excited, but we don't know where we're headed, right? We don't know where we're supposed to end at the end of this year in that journey, we get a lot of false starts because we're not really sure where we're going. So it's super important for that first piece to say, we got to make sure that we got all of these pieces in place. All right. Biggest idea. And I'm going to steal from Ed Kameanui, who is a Kamehameha grad, U of O faculty member for years and years. He talks about doing less, but doing that less better. So pick and choose what we're going to do and do it better. And this is really hard for us in education because we're the people who say, it's okay, I don't need to sleep till June. We're the people who are on a webinar on our Saturday, on our weekend when we're supposed to be off. We're the people who take money out of our own pocket to fund our classrooms. So it's a really big shift for us to say that we're going to do less, but what we do, we're going to do it really well. We're going to do it the right way, the way we know that it's supposed to be done. That allows us to only do it once, right? So we're not going to get a lot of those false starts. We're not going to have to ask for redos. We're going to do it one time. We're also going to look and say, what's the one thing I can do that's going to have the biggest impact for me? And that means we're going to invest in clear outcomes. Where do we want to be and how are we going to get there and are we making progress? So we're going to hedge our bet and we're going to choose things that work. We're going to choose something, some practice intervention that there's some data to say, this is a good thing. This is worth investing our time. So as I said, this is what Ed Kameanui calls working smarter, not harder, right? Setting ourselves up to be successful. So I talk about PBIS as being really like that slow tortoise kind of an approach. We don't want to be the hare that just rips through and goes super, super fast. We want to make sure that we go slow and so that we do it really, really well. PBIS is really all about relationships, building that climate, building those relationships. So I think Naomi's going to step in here and set up this activity because she has those kind of controls. But we want you guys to spend a little bit of time thinking about, sharing about how do you build positive relationships with your children, with the families of your children, and with your colleagues. So taking some time and brainstorming a list of things that you could do to build or strengthen those relationships. All right, and then unless there's any questions, I know you guys have been typing like crazy and I'm missing out on that awesome conversation. So I'm gonna hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So Teri, catch up on the chats. No. So what we're gonna do now, as Teri mentioned, this is a really cool technology that we have available at our fingertips. So this new system, Blackboard Ultra, we're able to break you out into groups, meaning that you don't have to do anything. I will just move you to another virtual room. So since there's Christy and myself, we're going to have 2 different groups. So you will only be able to hear and talk to the people in your virtual room. So it's almost like a virtual chat room, but you can turn on your mics once we get there and your videos even, and we're going to discuss this for about, say, 15 minutes. And then we're going to come back with our ideas and create a big brainstorm list. And if anyone wants to stay instead and talk to Teri in the main room and ask more specific questions, Can you let us know right now by raising your hand?
You want to start?
Right.
Okay. So we started out with communication with the child. Well, as for what ages I teach, I shared that my first and foremost is communication with the child, of me greeting the child at the door, coming down to the child's level, seeing the child eye to eye and having them feel comfortable, greeting them, letting them know that I'm glad to see them, as well as the parent. I always make sure I have eye to eye contact with the parents and the child to assure the parents that their child gonna be fine in school. As for my colleagues, we get together before school starts, go over our daily plan and what's gonna happen. And as the day go on, we switch roles to have the children know that there's not only one of us and there's others that they can look to for anything they need, any of their needs. And you want to share yours? And we have actually, where I'm at today, we have family planners. So of course, communication within the family planners of how the child has done throughout the day. We communicate to the parents through that also. But as I was sharing, I really, my first and foremost is having the children feel comfortable and the parents. So the parents know for sure that their child will be okay, and make sure the child knows that their parents will always pick them up. And that's my words. I always tell my children that I promise them that their mommies and daddies will never leave them in school and will always pick them up. So as my day go on, I always, that's me. I always reassure and tell my children, because at the age of 3, they always at some certain point find the time to say they miss their mommy and daddy. But I always make sure that I reassure them that they're always gonna be back. And at this age, I feel that this is the foundation of where it needs to be solid, so the child knows there's many more years to come along to get out of school. So my reassurance, I believe, is my number one thing that I make sure my family and my families and my children always have, and with my colleagues. And Kuni shared the teachers have to express the reason why they choose communication method carefully. That was Kuni's sharing in our group. Anything else, Christy, I missed?
I think that was a good summary. Thank you. One thing I did want to add that AJ also talked about, he talked about building rapport by finding the interests of the children, like what kind of sports they like or what kind of activities that they like. And that really helped him to get the buy-in or trust from the kiddos. And then also Cooney expressed how the trust is very important. So having the parents be able to trust totally in the teachers and what they'll say in communication. Yeah. Thank you, group one. Woo! Good job.
Thank you.
All right, that's awesome. So for group two, Linda's going to share for us.
Hi, this is Linda from Group 2. We talked about how we go about creating and building positive relationships, and we talked about different ways. Heather and Nikki and Naomi and we talked about some schools have an auto line where there are everyday greeters, and this gets the families comfortable and the kids feel safe and welcome. And we talked about how at some schools, such as mine, we have what's called Second Step. It's a social and emotional program, and it's embedded in throughout the day, and it's really about teaching kindness and caring and taking care of each other. We talked about how Nikki is a home visitor, and she made this great list of like things to do, and we labeled it, I believe she labeled it like cheap or for free, things that families can do together and with each other and with their children, and finding time once a week to spend time with each child in the family, kind of like a date night, and taking a child out and learning how to treat each other with respect, like the father taking a daughter out and opening the door for them, and a mother taking a son out and encouraging him to open the door for her, and doing these wonderful, kind and sharing and welcoming things for each other. And then we talked about how there's things at school also. They do like family nights at my school, and at other schools they have something similar, and also like movie night, where they encourage families to come and have dinner and watch a movie and sit on the ground and get dirty and messy. And yeah, it's just about kindness and caring really overall is what I'm hearing from my team. And I hope I said everything, team 2, so please chime in.
I think that was a great summary. Thank you, Linda. So yes, we are at the end of our hour and a half. Can you guys believe it? It went by so fast, I feel like. Thank you so much. And thank you, Teri, for helping us to understand PBIS in big picture. Oh, you are always a part of an H-PEP journey. And so tomorrow, if you are able to tune in, we are going to get together again, same Blackboard Ultra at 1:30. And Teri's going to be talking about Tier 1. Is that correct, Teri? I hope I got that correct. Tier 1. Yep, in more detail. In the meanwhile, you can be thinking of questions if you have for her, and let us know. I'll stay online for a little bit longer if anyone has any questions even about Blackboard or Google Community. And if not, if anyone has any last comments, please go ahead and take the mic. And thank you again, everyone. That was so much fun. I really enjoyed it.